So it seems that psychic powers are attained through the practice of pranayama, or the exercise of the life force. This is what we're going to hear about, how to achieve psychic powers. In preparation, one should abandon all habits and tendencies that are unrelated to what one wishes to achieve. In other words, there's no room for anything else. You have to be completely single-minded about this. One should learn to close the apertures in the body and also learn the practice of the different postures. And this is quite a big thing in itself. We heard previously about how you close your rectum with your heel. And there's ways of closing the eyes, nostrils and mouth and ears, usually with the hands. And there's also a way of turning the tongue back in itself and blocking the upper air passage. And this actually can involve surgery on the tongue. So that's quite a big thing in itself. And the different postures are clearly the yoga asanas. The diet should be pure. One should contemplate the meaning of holy scriptures. Right conduct and the company of holy ones are essential. But they'll probably tell you shouldn't be doing this. You shouldn't be pursuing these psychic powers. It's not conducive to spiritual truth, spiritual knowledge. Having renounced everything, one should sit comfortably. If then one practices pranayama for some time, without allowing anger, greed, etc. to arise within oneself, the life force comes under one's perfect control. Well, there's quite a lot to be going on with already. Right from sovereignty over the earth to total liberation, everything is dependent upon the movement of the life force. Hence, all such achievements are possible through the practice of pranayama. Now, this is where the teachings in self-enquiry differ from the teachings of pranayama. I said at the end of the last video how teachings of spirituality or self-enquiry are really essentially scientific in nature. They're about investigation, they're about direct observation. Where is the prana? The breath is detectable, but the breath is normally seen as analogous with prana. There is no evidence, there's no direct evidence for prana. There's only indirect evidence, as there's indirect evidence for everything else. From a spiritual point of view, we're not interested in indirect evidence. And the only way it seems to me that it's spiritually viable to understand the movement of the life force is the attention. The attention and what moves it. This is the life force. But we're not with that understanding right now. We're with the understanding that there's such a mysterious thing as prana, which can be controlled by the exercises of pranayama. So I'll just read on without comment because I'm not an expert in these matters, and I'm just reading it to give us some familiarity with the context of the Yoga Vasishta. It's a context which the Yoga Vasishta goes beyond and leaves behind, but in exploring it we've maybe got some idea of some of the more obscure passages which relate to the teachings of pranayama. Deep within the body there is a nadi known as the antravestika. A nadi is a channel of prana, a psychic nerve if you like. It rests in the vitals and it is the source of 100 other nadis. It exists in all beings, gods, demons and humans, animals and birds, worms and fish. It is coiled at its source. It is in contact with all the avenues in the body, from the waist right up to the crown of the head. Within this nadi dwells the supreme power. It is known as Kundalini because it is coiled in appearance. It's the serpent. It is the supreme power in all beings and it is the prime mover of all power. This is Kundalini Yoga we're talking about. When the prana or life force which is in the heart reaches the abode of the Kundalini, there arises within oneself an awareness of the elements of nature. It is when the Kundalini unfolds and begins to move that there is awareness within oneself. All the other nadis are tied to the Kundalini, as it were. Hence the Kundalini is the very source of consciousness and understanding or knowledge. So this is an introduction to Kundalini Yoga. And Rama asked, is not the infinite consciousness forever indivisible? If so, how does this Kundalini arise and manifest itself, thus revealing this consciousness? And here we've got the tension between the traditional teaching and the teaching of self-enquiry. The traditional teachings localize consciousness. How can it be localized if it's indivisible? Vasishta continued, indeed, there is the infinite consciousness alone everywhere at all times. However, it manifests as the elements here and there. The sun shines on everything, but it is reflected in a special way when its rays fall in a mirror. Similarly, the same infinite consciousness appears to be lost in some, clearly manifests in some, at the height of its glory in yet others. Even as space is empty space everywhere, consciousness is consciousness and not else, whatever the appearance may be. It does not undergo any change. This consciousness itself is the 5 root elements. You behold with your consciousness the same consciousness, which is the 5 root elements, as if you were seeing another within yourself, even as with one lamp you see 100 lamps. So in other words, everything is consciousness revealing itself to itself. On account of a slight movement of thought, the same reality which is consciousness seems to become the 5-fold elements and thence the body. The slight movement of thought is the attention when it moves away from itself, and it gives rise to the idea of difference, of differentiation. And this gives rise ultimately to the whole notion of a body and an external reality. In the same way, the same consciousness becomes worms and other creatures, metals and minerals, earth and what is on it, water and other elements. Thus the whole world is nothing but the movement of energy in consciousness, which appears as the 5-fold elements. The movement of energy in consciousness, this is a movement of the attention. It's the attention moving from one thing to another. Somewhere this energy is sentient, and elsewhere it appears as insentient, even as water, when exposed to cool wind, hardens and becomes cold. Thus is nature formed, and all things conform to nature. So here we've got this theory of how things come into being. There's a but which comes next. However, all this is but a play of words, a figure of speech. What else is heat and cold, ice and fire? Again, these distractions arise on account of conditioning and thought patterns. The wise man therefore inquires into the nature of such conditioning, whether it is latent or patent, good or evil. Such is fruitful quest. Vain argumentation is like boxing with space. Latent conditioning produces insentient beings. Patent conditioning gives rise to gods, humans, etc. In some there is dense conditioning, conducive to ignorance. In others there is attenuated conditioning, conducive to liberation. Conditioning alone is responsible for the diversity in creatures. For this cosmic tree known as creation, the first thought form is the seed, with the various spheres for various parts of the tree, and the past, present and future as the fruits. These will be the various spheres of existence. The 5-fold elements of which the tree is formed arise of their own accord and cease of their own accord. Of their own accord they diversify, and in due course they become unified and tranquil. So we started off with getting a teaching about psychic powers, and now we get the teaching of self-enquiry. But we'll get back to the psychic powers in the next chapter.